Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD, pro natural physique athlete, back with another video. Today I'm going to teach you how to lean bulk intuitively. You'll see a lot of bulking guides out there by gym bros where people teach you how to calculate your calorie and macro intake. But what if you don't want to be tracking meticulously all the time using myfitnesspal or a food scale? So I'll be going over how to lean bulk intuitively, that is, without rigidly counting macros. Quick outline for today, I'm going to be giving you a full bulking guide, and we'll start off with talking about the rate of gain, which is going to be really important to understand before we set up our diet. After that, I'll go over macros and how to hit your macros by eyeballing. After that, we'll talk about tracking changes in your body to make sure that you're optimizing muscle growth and not putting on too much fat. And finally, we'll go over how to make adjustments to your diet plan to sustain your optimal progress. For more top-notch science-based hypertrophy information, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. Okay, let's kick this off with a discussion of why we should lean bulk. A lot of you have probably gone through a dirty bulking phase where you put on weight at a rapid pace and you ended up gaining muscle but also gaining a lot of fat. In a lean bulk, you gain weight at a more conservative rate. Here's why. First of all, you want to maximize hypertrophy with a sufficient calorie surplus. A calorie surplus is a very favorable state for muscle growth, and you want to be in enough of a calorie surplus so that you capture all of your potential gains. One of the ideas behind being in a calorie surplus is that it gives your body the raw energy and materials it needs to build muscle tissue. However, beyond a certain rate of weight gain, you're going to max out your muscle gains and just start putting on fat. This maximum rate of muscle growth will be higher for beginners and lower for more advanced athletes. Now, the other purpose of a lean bulk is to minimize unnecessary fat gain. Assuming we're bulking and cutting, what's the problem with gaining a little bit of extra fat, assuming we can just cut it off later? The problem here is that fat loss phases present a large opportunity cost for us. Getting into a calorie deficit is tough on you, plus it's very unfavorable for muscle growth. If you're a beginner, you probably will be able to body recomp, which means building muscle and losing fat at the same time, which includes being in a calorie deficit. But as you become more advanced, you'll want to actually bulk and cut. You really want to maximize your bulk to cut ratio, which is spending more time bulking and less time cutting. So if we dirty bulk and put on a lot of weight and a lot of fat, we're going to have to spend more time cutting later, which means less time spent productively bulking. Now that we know why we want to lean bulk, here are my recommended rates of gain. As a beginner, that is in your first 1 to 2 years of serious training, I recommend gaining weight at a rate of about 1 to 1.5% of your body weight per month. For an intermediate to an advanced athlete, I recommend gaining weight at a rate of about 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per month. These are rough estimates, it will depend on the person, but the idea here is that you're going for a conservative rate of gain to capture all of that hypertrophy without putting on excess fat. Okay, now let's talk about how to hit your macros intuitively. That is, without rigidly calculating by weighing things out on a scale and or using myfitnesspal. First of all, for most natural bodybuilders, hitting overall calories and protein are the most important things. Once you get those numbers overall for the day in check, you're getting most of your gains. Now, in previous videos, I've talked about how to figure out your maintenance calories and then how to add on calories to bulk precisely. But it's actually possible to be pretty precise without actually calculating your calorie intake. Having a consistent meal structure is the important thing here, especially if you're new. Starting off with a fairly basic meal plan that you keep pretty stable throughout the week is going to help you a lot. If you're always using the same dishes or meal prep containers, you can actually get your portion sizes very consistent across the week. In this way, even though you might not actually be calculating the exact calorie and macro breakdown, you're at least being consistent. And consistency here is all that really matters, because once we know that we can be consistent and that we can make changes in a controlled fashion, we can actually end up being pretty bang on with our overall macros. Okay, next point here is that you got to learn to eyeball. I think this is crucial to be a natural bodybuilder, especially if you want to take things to the next level. I call this one of the main skills of a bodybuilder. It really comes with practice. Start by just looking at macros of all your favorite common foods when you're eating them. You can look at nutrition labels, search things up on Google, or use something like myfitnesspal. Note that once you look things up once, you won't have to keep looking them up later. A little game I like to play is guess the macros or calories, where I'll look at a dish or a specific piece of food, guess the calories or macros, and then actually look them up. Next, the one number you do want to know is your overall daily protein intake. And you want to be aiming for a minimum of about 0.72 to 1.0 grams of protein per pound of body weight per day. The way I would handle protein is figure out your total daily protein intake, think about how many meals you usually eat in a day, and then divide up your protein intake equally across those meals. Then get a good idea what one meal's protein portion looks like for you. For example, say you wanted to hit 180 grams of protein per day, and you eat 5 meals per day. If you divide 180 out by 5, you get 36 grams of protein per meal. Note, however, that we're including protein from all sources here, including your carb sources. So for a typical meal plan that I was following at one point, I found that in my typical carb sources, I would end up getting about 30 grams of protein from those sources across the day. So you can subtract that from your dedicated protein sources. So in this case, you would only need 150 grams of protein per day from direct protein sources, which ends up being 30 grams per meal. This is the basic structure that I use when I'm bulking, so I know very well what 30 grams of protein looks like for different protein sources. Now let's move on and talk about tracking progress when you're lean bulking. I like to do this by scale weight. Scale weight is the most reliable indicator of what's actually happening with your body. The rate of change of your scale weight is going to be the main indicator that you'll use to guide your diet manipulations. So I really want you to think about your calorie surplus as scale weight changes. People will often talk about the 3,500 calories per pound rule. That is 1 pound of fat equals 3,500 calories. And this approximately works for bulking as well. But if you want to, you can actually skip the calorie counting step entirely if you know what your scale weight is doing and you have a consistent meal structure that you make controlled changes to. So if you're a beginner, I'd recommend weighing yourself every day and watching trends of your weight over time. And as you become more advanced, you might not weigh yourself as often. Say if you're aiming for 0.5 pounds of weight gain per week, as long as you're hitting that rate of gain, you know you're getting in the right amount of calories. Weighing yourself every day and taking averages can help get around confounders. Note your confounders to scale weight will include your carb intake, salt intake, and your activity level the day before. Having a lot of carbs can bias your scale weight because you might store more glycogen. Having a lot of salt may lead to water retention, and doing a lot of activity the day before, whether that's through cardio or training, can decrease your glycogen levels. So the first two confounders will cheat your scale weight up, and activity will cheat your scale weight down. Note that these confounding fluctuations don't actually represent muscle or fat tissue. However, to some extent, you can get around this through visual appearance. As you become more advanced, you'll get a better sense of when your body is looking full because of glycogen or from water retention. And you'll be able to factor this in to interpret your scale weight changes properly. One other tool I like to use during bulking is waist size. In general, I recommend people stay in the leaner end of body fat percentages. For example, around 10 to 15% for men and somewhere between 18 to 25% for females. In this range, you should have a pretty narrow waist. If you find your waist starting to expand pretty rapidly across the weeks, it may be a sign that you're putting on more fat than you need to. I track this just by seeing how my lifting belt and my clothing belts feel. If you're notching up your belt size really quickly, it may be a sign that you're bulking too aggressively. Finally, for tracking progress while bulking, it's useful to track occasionally. As I said, you don't need to be rigidly counting all of your macros, and I actually don't want you to. Since you'll be spending most of your time bulking, I actually do recommend that you try and get on an intuitive approach at some point. You don't want to be really rigid in counting macros and calories all the time. But it can be helpful to occasionally do an audit of your calories and macros, where you track everything that you eat across a day and then tally up your macro and calorie intake just to get a sense of where you're at. This might sometimes reveal gaps in your eyeballing ability. Okay, finally, let's talk about making adjustments. The problems you'll run into with lean bulking are either you won't be gaining weight fast enough or you'll be gaining weight too fast. If you're gaining weight too quickly, decrease the calorie density of the foods you're eating or just reduce your portion sizes. Note that throughout all this, you'll want to be keeping your protein sources stable. Most of your manipulation should be coming through your carbs and fats. Now, if you're not gaining weight fast enough, say your weight is stalling, I'd suggest adding about 100 calories per day. Again, we're doing this intuitively, so you don't actually need to know the exact calorie intake, but my main point is that you want to be making small adjustments. If you make big adjustments, you might have a big bump in weight gain, and you might put on a lot of unnecessary fat before actually realizing it. And to increase your calories, you can either increase the calorie density of the foods you're eating or increase the portions of your carb and fat sources. In general, the partitioning between carbs and fats doesn't matter that much, but at some point I would recommend that you try a higher carb bulking approach. As you make these changes, continue to monitor your weight gain and make adjustments as needed to get that desired rate of weight gain. Hopefully this bulking guide was helpful for you guys. If you really want to optimize your lean bulking phases, check out my new book, Dr. Swole's Bulking Manual. This is a definitive step-by-step guide to set up a lean bulking plan and run it over time for optimal hypertrophy. I think it's really important for people to understand how to bulk properly to maximize muscle growth and minimize unnecessary fat gain. And it's important for you to learn how to execute lean bulking phases properly early on. If you want to understand how the calories and macros work and how to calculate calorie intake, check out this video where I go more into depth. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, share this video with your bulking friends, and we'll see you next time.